Welcome everyone to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I am your host today. We want to thank our sponsors, a Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. They're a wonderful organization here in the Southeast, and they have a variety of exhibits, everything from weaving to quilting to knitting and felting, and you name it. They have got exhibits coming up. Great organization. Go check them out. Thank you for sponsoring Textiles and Tea today. As always, we want your questions. Please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. I can't always see them if they're in the chat. So if you would, put them in the Q&A and we'll get to as many as we can. Today, we have Kevin Aspaas. We are so excited to have him here today. Kevin is a Navajo textile and fiber artist. He is known for his work with the Navajo Wedge Weave tapestry technique. He practices a process he calls sheep to loom. And we're going to talk some more about that today too. This process entails gathering and spinning wool from a small flock of Navajo-Churro sheep that he raises in Shiprock in New Mexico. In addition to spinning his own yarn, he works exclusively with natural dyes, noting that producing textiles in the manner that his ancestors have done honors not only his relatives from the past, but also the land and the animals. We're excited to have him here today. Hey, Kevin. Welcome. I think you're saying, there you go.
There you go.
We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
First question is, what is your favorite tea?
I'm more of a coffee drinker, but if I had to go with tea, I think right now it'd probably be a tea that's native to the Southwest. Generally, we know it as Navajo tea, but you know, the other indigenous groups in the Southwest, American Southwest, have their own names for it as well. It's regularly known as Coda as well too. So yeah.
All right. We're having, I think, a little delay in the image, but the sound is great. We'll see how it goes. I may have to have you turn your camera off from time to time, Kevin. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Okay. Let's start with the basic of how did you get started in fiber? I know it's a family tradition, but share a little more about it with us if you would.
So I started weaving when I was 10 years old. I I've started calling it an early apprenticeship at a young age. I you know, grew up around weaving, grew up around seeing the process that my mother took, a lot of her work through. So that's how I got started. I started learning how to weave warped face weavings, primarily known as sash belts. And she wove them a lot for the Pueblo communities because at the time we lived in Santa Fe. So, she was providing services to, to the groups that were closest around us. So, yeah. And my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, also wove too as well, and she did a lot to support her family in that manner. So we don't have any existing textiles from her work, from her collection. A lot of
Oh,
it went to the trading posts. Yeah, so and no one thought to save a piece from her. So that's kind of the unfortunate part about that. On my paternal grandmother's side, her mother's wove too as well, and I have this really neat photo that I found a couple of years ago that my aunt had, and it's of my paternal grandmother, her aunts, and her mother, and they were standing in front of, a couple of big textiles, and there's a photo in the photo as well. My oldest uncle, as a toddler, was in there and he was holding a lamb. So it's a pretty neat photo and a pretty, really great, unique history to be a part of.
that's amazing. That's wonderful. That's great. Well, you're very well known for your wedge weave in your work. So, what was the catalyst that you decided to start using this weave structure? And when did you first start weaving with it? I mean, I'm assuming you started off with just the general weaving that your family taught you, but when did you start specializing in wedge weave?
I started using Wedge Weave back in 2014. I was doing an apprenticeship with a master weaver from Goat Springs, Arizona, by the name of Roy Cady.
Uh-huh.
And that first summer of my apprenticeship with him, that was one of the techniques that he was teaching, along with, other Navajo weaving techniques that he has in his arsenal and his tool bag. So um, the afternoon that we were learning this technique, I did like 3 rows of wedge, so a zigzag pattern, and I instantly kind of just got hooked onto it. I think, thinking back to it, what really drew me in was the structure of the weave itself. Very unusual, very unique. And at that point, I didn't know any of the history. So as soon as I began to, really work with the technique itself, I started to do a little bit more reading and research into it. And I, came to the realization that it's a very rare technique and that not a lot of weavers implement it in their own textiles. But also, too, at the same time, what makes it really unique is that Navajos, Navajo weavers, Danet weavers, they were the ones who came up with this design, came up with this technique without any kind of in sort of influence. And while I will say that, it's very unique to Navajo weaving, the technique itself and the thought process of weaving a wedge into a textile is not itself unique. You can find, tidbits of it, of examples of wedge weave in cultures around the world. But what makes it really unique to our community is that it's woven in its entirety throughout the entire piece. Aside from, there might be the bottom band of plain weave, and the top band of plain weave. But aside from that, majority of it is woven through the entirety of the piece. So, yeah. And yeah, that's kind of sort of the catalyst of it. I tell people that I'm a sucker for the underdog, and you know when I first started weaving these, a lot of well, a lot of the people who own trading posts around the reservations were telling me that they're not, I can't sell this, and so I'm not gonna buy it, and you should weave something different. And I've even gotten comments of like, oh, you're the kid that weaves crooked rugs. And so, a lot of this kind of just motivated me a little bit further along with what I wanted to do with Wedge Weave. And so I went down to Sedona, and they bought one of my first wedge weave pieces, and it was there for a really long time, and I would check the website here and there. And after my appearance at the Heard Museum in 2018, I wanted to go back and rebuy that piece from them. And after that weekend, it was gone. Someone had picked it up. So I know where it now currently lives, so I have yet to go revisit it. Um, but yeah, that's how I got started, and that's how, I've continued to go along on this journey that I'm on.
Well, good for you for standing your ground. That's wonderful. Because this next image, we could talk about this for the whole hour. I think this is amazing. This is the wedge weave um, with a broken diamond twill. And I've not seen any, I'm sure maybe it's out there, but I've not seen anybody do this. So how did you come up with doing a twill and a wedge weave? And then I want you to talk a little bit about, you were a little uneasy about doing this, right?
Um, yeah, I was. So when I started learning wedge weave from my mentor, Roy Cady, one of the first questions I asked him was, do you think you can combine both techniques together, a twill technique and a wedge weave? And, his response was, yeah, anything can be done. He said, and he mentioned to me that no one's done it so far. So if you were to do it, you would be the first one. You would have to figure it out. And so, I sat on that idea for a really long time, over 5 years, I believe, till I finally, you're gonna do this, and you're gonna figure it out. And this is not the first example of it. I did an earlier piece back in 2018, I believe. And in that piece, it was just like three bands of wedge with the diamond twill, just a regular closed diamond. And that one I was hand picking the count. And if you're familiar with twill weave, there's a specific count that goes along with it. And diamond twill is, on the diamond twill itself is kind of on the easier end of twill counts. And so, picking that alone and memorizing that kind of count itself was a task in it, was a task. And so I only did it for like 4 rows, and I said, forget it, and I'm just gonna, finish this with the plain weave. And um, but when it came to this piece, I knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to weave the entire piece in a twill. And this is one of my favorite counts, a broken diamond twill. And there's just something that's, it plays with your eyes, and you think something is there, but it's not. I really don't know how to describe it. It's just a really eye-catching twill, and a really unique one at that. And so I managed to merge them together. It was the only piece that I was going to be taking to the Heard Museum, Guild Indian Market, which, if you're familiar with doing markets and selling art, like that's not a good plan, not a good idea. And so, um, as soon as I finished it, I took it off the loom, and I tell you, I was not happy with how it turned out. It wasn't satisfied. Like, I don't know what I was aiming for in terms of what the outcome was gonna be, but when I looked at the finished piece, it, in my mind, it wasn't it. It wasn't what I wanted. And, I had my sisters, I called my sisters, and I was, freaking out because I was telling them what it looked like. And I sent them photos, and they called me dramatic. They told me to calm down, sit with it for a couple of days. And, they said it looks really nice. It looks really good. And so, I sat with it for a couple days and it grew on me. And, now it's one of my favorite pieces. This piece alone, has gotten a lot of attention. And, people, that see it in person, they're always blown away by it. And the Herd Museum, luckily the Herd Museum, they were the ones that snatched it. They purchased it from me, and which I'm really thankful. I'm really happy about because, you know, thinking about future exhibitions, whether they're going to display it, it was going to be there at an institution that's going to take care of this piece. And so they they're taking really good care of it. It's on display right now in their show called Substance of Stars,
Mm.
and there's a Navajo wing of that exhibition. And it's displayed in there, and I've gone there probably like 5 times just to revisit this piece and see it. And, I'm just kind of me myself, I'm still kind of blown away by the way by the way I was able to produce it and create, bring it this idea that I had back in 2015, 2014, bring it to life and bring it to fruition. So, um, and throughout the entire t process that I was, working on this piece, it was very uneasy. It made me feel very uneasy. And part of, my apprenticeship under Roy Cady, under, learning from him was, do telling he was, telling the group of us that was learning from him at the time, weave what you want to weave what you want to see in the world, do something that hasn't been done. And, taking that to heart and really, kind of, pushing myself out of my own comfort zones and I think that's what I did right here. And I really learned a lot about myself and about my own weaving when it came to this piece. And, this piece in particular really allowed me to um, hone in on, warp spacing, warp tension,
Mm.
my weft count, and really, if you look closely at the photo on the right-hand side, the detailed shot, you can see that all the diamonds are all lined up with one another. Now, of course, I could have just, not cared about that and just, kept weaving it as I went. But one of the most difficult parts about combining these two, especially this particular weaving um, twill count, was keeping the diamonds all lined up with one another. And yeah, it's just an incredible piece.
One thing I thought about was that it feels like old and new, or maybe old and unique combined when you did this. Do you ever get pushback with people about, oh, you should, like kind of like the trading post? Now, do you still get pushback from people saying, oh, you need to do the traditional, you shouldn't be doing this stuff?
Um, a lot of people have I kind of attribute it just to being young. People will make these, kind of comments to a younger artist working in an art form that's pretty ancient, pretty old.
Hmm.
And so people that aren't familiar, especially within my own community, that aren't familiar with wedge weave, um, I would get a lot of comments of saying, that's not traditional, that's not Navajo. And, I've from 2014 to now, I've done a lot of educating and a lot of, weaving with the wedge weave alone and trying to, gain attention, not for myself, but the weaving technique itself, so that more weavers can try, can experiment with it, can, see what they can create with it. For a couple of years, I was the only one that was working with this wedge weave technique, and I wasn't necessarily receiving a lot of backlash, but it brought up a lot of uncomfortable conversations in regards to why it went away, in regards to who was responsible for this technique to be pushed out of the wayside, out of the limelight. And so it made, I think it made people talk about these things, make these uncomfortable conversations in terms of what the political climate was, in the time period that it was created in, that it came about. And so uh, now today I'm really well known for Wedge Weave, and a lot of people, they know me for this technique. And I encourage a lot of people, a lot of weavers to try this technique. And, just, you don't have to run with it like how I did, but, just having uh, expanding your own weaving repertoire, and, learning this and playing with this technique itself. And so, um, now I feel like it's a lot more accepted. It's a lot more practiced, and um, well, weavers may only use it in like a small little section of their work, but even that alone is a lot, is doing a lot. So yeah, to answer that
Kind of,
question.
uh, kind of off on another topic, but the same topic was I was reading an article that you had written or an interview with you, and I hadn't thought about this, but you talked about how when you were talking about how things change and impact and what causes change. I hadn't thought about one of the biggest impacts on the traditional Navajo weaving is what would sell, which is true for any artist. But I think I always thought about, oh, they're weaving the same thing their ancient ancestors did. Well, not necessarily, was it? There was some change because of if you want it to sell, you got to do it this way, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, as someone that's kind of, really studying Navajo textile history, and even, just being part of this history itself, there is a consistent um theme among Navajo weaving that it's always changing with each
Mhm.
generation. Um, that can be due because of, political climate, that can be due to, what new materials are being brought in, what we're being influenced by, what we're seeing. And, nowadays, we can travel and we can see the world, and, even that itself, and bringing those kind of experiences back into our own work, and being a part of that process, it's we're really a lot more connected with the world now. Um, you know, I say, we once used to weave for one another for utilitarian reasons, and now that's changed to we're weaving to support ourselves, maybe to support our families, or maybe it's just, something we do on the side. And it's just an incredible thing to think about, especially, given, what we as a people and indigenous people as a whole have gone through, and the fact that a lot of us have maintained cultural arts, and maintained what culture we have left that is connected to the art forms that are surrounded by us. And so, I feel very fortunate and very, full of gratitude that I'm able to practice this.
Well, that kind of goes into my next question, which is you've stated that when you're sitting at the loom, you are sitting at the world. So would you talk some about what that means for you? And then we have a great image that
Um,
you're weaving.
Okay. Um, so, at a very basic level, um, if at a very basic level, when you look at the loom, when you look at the tools and, the technology that's behind it, a lot of it involves the act of creation. And life is always moving. Life is always, life moves whether you want it to or not. And so, when you're sitting at the loom, it's always changing. Your weaving is always changing. It's always growing in an upward motion, in an upward fashion. And so, and that starts from the bottom. And the bottom of the loom, I won't
Wow.
go into too much detail, but the bottom of the loom represents the earth. The top of the loom represents the sky. And the pillars that hold up that space that allows us to thrive, that allows us to live, are the loom poles. And then, our warp strings is rain, male and female rain, and then the sun halos is what holds the weaving to the loom itself. And then you have your tension rope, which represents
Mhm.
lightning. So a lot of our, weaving is the loom, the weaving tools, the spindles, the combs, the battens, everything is in relation to creation, is in relation to um, rain, to moisture, to snow, because we live in a very arid part of the Southwest and on the Colorado Plateau, and so we don't get a lot of rain. And whatever rain that comes in, whatever snow that comes in, it's really welcomed, and everyone knows we need it to replenish not only ourselves but the earth, the plants, the springs that are in the mountains, and even just washing away kind of like spiritually washing away negativity and keeping us you know hopeful for what's ahead of us in life. And so you have a lot of time to think about a lot of this, especially when you're weaving,
Hmm.
especially when you're sitting there and it's a really repetitive motion and going back and forth and just working on a piece. You have a lot of time to think about. You have a lot of time in your own mind. And f- when I'm at the loom for for a period of time, 4 to 6 hours, that's a lot of time to be spending with yourself. And so um you tend to think about, a lot of things that are happening around the world, not only just, what's going on with you yourself personally, but, what's going on throughout the world and what's going on in your community, what's going on with your family, your sheep, and, all of this stuff. So that's kind of what I mean by when I'm sitting at the loom, I'm sitting at the world.
I love that. I like that a lot. That's great. Because you're right. It's such a kind of zen sometimes of you just get in your head. So when you're weaving, I'll think about that a lot the next time I weave. The other thing when you
Yeah.
talk about being in your head is that you talk about that when you weave, you shouldn't do it when you're angry. And that what you're feeling can be in the weaving itself, right? So, do you find it's difficult to adhere to that? Are there times when you're like, "Ugh, but I got to get this weaving done," or whatever? And later
Yeah.
on, I'm curious, when you see work, do you remember what was going on with you? I know I do. I have memories stuck in my weaving. So, would you talk some about that?
I think it's fairly easy to adhere to that rule that rule that I have, and I wasn't the one personally, wasn't the one who said that for myself. A lot of my family, my maternal uncles, my mother's brothers were the ones who lectured me a lot about about weaving and what it means to us as Navajo people, as indigenous people in general too as well. And one of the main points was when you're creating anything, when you're making something for somebody, it could be, weaving, it could be, making jewelry, it could even be cooking. You shouldn't be, in a very, in a mood of sorts. So, because you don't want people to have that kind of energy carrying with them. You don't want people to be eating the food that you cooked that and you were mad, because that kind of energy transfer, isn't good for anybody at all. And so that's kind of just the main point that they made to me. And so, my uncles have passed, some of my uncles have passed, and I remember, I keep that teaching in my mind. So, when there's moments of frustration, I'll step away from the loom. I'll, go outside, touch the ground, touch some grass, and chill out for a bit. If it comes to it, take a walk and or sit outside for a bit, and then come go back to it because it's not going. That one piece isn't gonna go anywhere until I finish it. So I really don't have to. There's no rush at trying to figure something out. Um, but in times of frustration, things like that, and if I'm mad, if I'm mad, I'm upset, that's definitely a no-no for myself. I'll stay away from my loom and I won't work on anything, and I'll probably just listen to some music, listen to a podcast, or just mm, try something to get my mind off whatever I'm mad about. When it comes to being sad, though, that's kind of a different story. Um, when my uncle passed, there was a time period, where I was had commissions that I had to complete.
Mm.
And, you know, there was a bigger piece that I was working on, and I really had to sit down and work at what I was doing, even going through the kind of that grief of losing him. And it wasn't fun. It was very difficult.
Mm.
But it wasn't anger wasn't a part of it. It was just my own grief, my own sadness that was a part of that. And so for a while after I finished it, I didn't like that piece for a while.
Huh.
But it's gotten a lot of attention. It was a part of a show in Santa Fe called Horizons, and a lot of people it received a lot of good feedback. And, after, looking at it and seeing it for, social media, even just looking back at my own photos of it, I kind of just, I see where that grief is at, where that sadness came from, and, you know, j- just being able to have something to help me work through that and process it is probably one of the greater things about, about weaving itself. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have for the answer to that question.
Well, one thing I really want to talk about are the rug dresses. Um, so we got an image here of a rug dress. And can you just talk some about how they're woven and they're constructed because they're connected. Oh, isn't that beautiful? So talk some about these rug dresses if you would.
So, I really don't like the term rug when it comes to Navajo weaving, but, I guess for the time period, that's what they were known as. I personally like to use woven dresses, because they're woven and it's a dress. The Navajo term for them is called a bile, and it's just, generally what it means is it's a piece of cloth. Um, and so the way each weaver is different. Each weaver here on the Navajo Nation, they make their dresses differently from one another. There's not one set way that they do it. And so I have a pretty wide loom. It's probably about, I want to say, 8 feet wide, and it's about 8 feet tall. Of course the dresses aren't that big, but it that size of a loom, it allows me to put the panels side by side on the loom. That
Oh,
way,
yeah.
when I'm weaving up and building the designs, weaving the designs, I can see that they line up as best as I can make them, and I'm human, I don't get everything perfect. So it might be off by like half an inch or a quarter of an inch, but they're pretty symmetrical with one another. And there's generally a design at the bottom of the dress, the bottom border, and then there's a design at the top border, and then there's a blank portion, um, in the middle, in the midsection area. And once they're finished and they come off the loom, they are sewed from the way I sew them is I use a blanket stitch, and I go from their rib cage down to their knee, and then I sew up on top of the shoulders. There are some dresses that I've done that where they've requested a collar slit, so they can use a put a pin right there, and have like a little um, collar on the dress itself. But the more traditional versions of the dresses, they have no collar, and so they kind of reveal the shoulders a little bit more, and they're held up by a sash belt. So the sash belt is the belt that's the red belt, the red, white, and green belt right there in the
Mhm.
middle. And the belts are supposed to carry most of the weight of the dress itself to secure it to the body. That way, nothing's hanging too much on the shoulders. And so that's kind of in a nutshell, Cliff Notes version of what a rug dress is, a woven dress. And this particular photo that we have right here, I wove this for my sister. last year. I finished it at the beginning of May last year. The
Mm-hmm.
design itself is a design from my Uncle Dan and that he created. And then my signature now has become a little hogan. So that little hogan that's on the bottom right-hand corner, kind of above that design, that's a hogan is a word for house in Navajo language. And that's become my signature now. So the dresses now have will always have a little hogan. The dresses but prior to 23, 24 don't have hogans, but now I've started to use that. And so yeah, that's kind of just what I've been doing a lot now. Think for about when did I do my first dress? I think around 2015, 2016, I think it was. And I've just been, slowly just working on dress orders here and there. I try to limit myself at two a year. It's
Oh,
just
wow.
a lot of work. Essentially, weaving two big textiles aside from, whatever the other stuff that I personally want to work on. And um, so yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to show some more of these incredible dresses. I think you may have just answered my question, which was, I'm assuming these are commissions that either people come to you and say, I want to dress. I'm assuming these are for special occasions. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do people come to you? I'm assuming you don't just make them and then, oh, by the way, I have a dress.
So I've gotten a lot of, social media following on Facebook and Instagram. So a lot of my commissions come through social media.
Mm-hmm.
Rarely do people, in person come and visit me. So it's it's pretty, social media is just one of those things that's just kind of wild concept to think about and how we're just so connected more so now than we have been in like the 20 years ago. But like I said, a lot of these are commissions and um, I really like to see them being worn by the young ladies, by the women that order them or their families order a dress for them for special occasions. I've primarily woven them for, high school graduations,
Oh.
college graduations. Um, I'm doing my first wedding dress this summer too, so I'm really excited about that. And at some point in time, because these dresses are probably gonna outlive me, they'll be passed down from generation to generation, and I make them pretty large. I don't make them to be fitted. I make them oversized so that they can grow into it, they can grow with it. Um, and even if they pass it down to a family member, it'll still fit them as well. Um, so yeah, that's kind of yeah.
I would love to see the wedding dress. I envision an article in our magazine about you making that wedding dress. Sally, I'm sure she's watching. Because you know Sally Orgren, our editor, right? Because you met her. She's the
Yeah.
one that told us about you. She were like, oh, you've got to talk to this guy. His work's amazing. So, Sally, I'm sure you're watching. We want an article here. Now, you're also a dyer, right? And I'm always curious why people dye. It's a lot of work. And it seems like either dyers are because they need a specific color or they want control over which colors they have, or they just love the creativity of it, or a combination thereof. So here's some of your beautiful yarn. I love this image of your hand with your gorgeous ring. So talk some about why you dye.
I think I think a lot of it has to do about control over my own colors. There is something about, buying yarn that's already pre-dyed that's um like using a commercial dye in that
Mhm.
fashion, there there's a certain life, there's a certain spirit to colors that you've done yourself, that you've gone out, that you've collected, these plants, and then, you're hiking, you're walking around looking for these certain plants that produce certain colors, or you're growing the plants themselves to produce a color, or, even down to, looking for bugs that, cochineal that creates these colors. So, um, it's just a part of the process that, you know, I already weave by hand, I might as well do this part of the process. I might as well not skip this part of the process. And it's arguably one of the more funner parts of the process.
Oh,
Um, Especially getting to see colors change about or change in front of your eyes, basically. And it's an intimate process to be a part of as well. And getting having the what is that word I'm looking for? Having the it's basically just having control over what kind of color you want, what kind of color you want to work with personally, versus going and buying yarn that's already pre-dyed. You don't really have choice, agency over it, over what color you want. And so but also at the same time, majority of the work that I do when it comes to dyeing, most of it is experimentation. I have yet to write down a dye recipe and make a booklet, little cards. I've yet to do that. So a lot of the stuff that I do is kind of just like from memory, you know, memorizing what I did last time and applying it to what I'm doing now. And of course, it's not going to turn out the same every single time. There might be something variable that change, and it's just a wonderful process to be a part of. And I say that over and over again throughout this whole thing, well, throughout the whole talk. I just feel really lucky to be able to do this and have knowledge and have people, teach me and be willing to share with me. So, yeah.
well, and I hope you understand how we appreciate that you share with us and talk about what you're doing and teach your skills too. You're keeping that whole circle of life kind of thing going, circle of knowledge, maybe not circle of life. Well, one thing I want to ask you about is that your weaving is utilitarian, you make dresses and the sashes and everything, but you do also do a lot of artwork. And you talked about the piece at Heard, but you also have a piece in the Denver, one of the museums in Denver, and I'm not sure which one it is, right? Um, this Wedge Weave image we've got coming up is the piece in Denver, I think. On Is one of these the Denver piece?
No, 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 no.
Okay. Mandy, go to the next image. There we go. That one's in Denver, right? Because what I wanted to talk about is that
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the right image, Mandy. Keep that one up. Is that not only do you do more art form, but you also do the more utilitarian, like this beautiful sash, right? So
Yeah.
they sound like they're both important to you. It's not like you choose one over the other. I could be wrong. So are they both important to you in your work?
They are both, yeah, well, the whole reason why I started learning how to weave is because, um, I wanted to sell belts to just like my mom. She wove belts and she sold them to the communities along the Rio Grande Pueblos,
Uh-huh.
northern Rio Grande and southern Rio Grande Pueblos, and some of the villages out there. And during when we would go to feast days, to their celebrations that they would invite us to, we would see these belts that my mom had made, and me and my sisters would, kind of discuss, oh, that's mom's belt, or no, this one's mom's belt. And we would, my mom had a certain way of creating them. And so That was just something that I grew up witnessing her being a part of being a part of that kind of community and sharing offering her services in that manner. And so as I got older, I realized, that's the whole point of why we have weaving, to make, you know ceremonial regalia, um, to our communities, to make these available to our communities. And as someone that has the capability, the ability to make them, it's kind of a responsibility. I wouldn't say it's a burden, but it's more of a responsibility to make them and make them available and make them accessible. Um, I do the art part to make money. That's the opposite of the side of the spectrum, I guess you could say, to support myself and support my sheep and support what I want to do with my life. And um, when I make these items for my community, there's no way they could afford the prices, for if I use the same scale when it comes to making art. So a lot of times, I might, I may trade, a belt for something else, and I might not make money from it, but there's a trade, there's a transaction that happened, or a family might pay me with sheep instead of money itself, or things of that nature when it comes to utilitarian items that is needed for their own families. And so there's two opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to what I do, but it's something that I really enjoy and I'm really fortunate to be a part of, and really I'm just really full of gratitude either way. If someone buys art from me, yeah, yeah, cool. I'm set for a couple months. Or if someone, if I make a belt or doing belts is a lot easier than weaving dresses, but um, doing that part and is kind of, I don't know how to describe that part. I don't want to say it's ego, but it's there's a satisfaction that comes to it when I seeing my pieces being utilized in the manner in which they're meant for.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
yeah. I think a lot of us who weave dish towels, and not to compare them to that beautiful sash, but it's like, I don't want to give dish towels to people who won't use them. I don't want to give a scarf to someone who doesn't want to use it. I want to see
Yeah.
it used and shown off. And so I agree with you there.
Mm.
We have lots of questions today. So let me ask you one more question and then we're going to go to those. What's next for you?
What's next for me? Um, I really don't know what's next for me. Um, we are taking the sheep up the mountain in June, so that's what I'm
Hmm.
currently getting ready for. I'm trying to finish a dress right now. It's on the loom behind me, that I've been working on for a while now. I've finally got some time these last 2 weeks to kind of, try to really crank it out and finish it. It'll get done, and I think I'm just gonna keep moving, keep weaving, keep growing my flock, and that's kind of been, having sheep has kind of been my a life goal of mine since I was a little kid. So, um, just living that dream right now. It's a lot of work, but
Mm.
it's nothing to complain about, and um, it's yeah. I'm just really thankful. I'm just full of gratitude for a lot of the things that have happened in my life.
Well, we got tons of questions, so I'm going to get to as many as I can. And some of them I'm going to skip because they're like, dying questions and how do you do this and how you do that. I would encourage you to contact Kevin if we don't get to him today. But first of all, everyone wants to know, what kind of loom do you use? You talked about the loom behind you. What kind of
Um,
loom is that?
yeah. It is a well, so there's different ways of making the looms. You can use wood, you can use metal. It just depends on what you have available to you.
Uh-huh.
But the looms that I have right now, I have two looms that are metal, and they're just metal square frames. That's it. They have feet to help stand them up. The loom that I make my belts on, it's the same loom that my mom used when she used to weave a lot. So it's older than me and it's wooden. So, and there's something about the measurements of everything that she has perfect and I don't want to get rid of it. So, yeah. And they're all vertical. None of them are horizontal. They're all vertical. They all stand upright. That's the other thing part. Other
I was
part
going to
about it.
ask you, was it vertical or horizontal? Okay. Um, people want to know, Barbara wants to know, what is the count for the twill? And do you pick up threads in order to get them in a certain order to get the twill, which I'm assuming you would have to.
Yeah, so it's a four shed count. So there's three heddles and one shed stick. So yes, it's an easy, diamond twill is, there's diagonal herringbone twill, which is two by twos all the way across. If you want to do diamonds, you add a three and a one. And so generally my general rule for twills, especially when it comes to a four heddle twill, is
Mhm.
that the first and third sticks are opposites of each other. So whatever's pulled in front is pushed to the back on the other stick, and just to answer that very quickly, it's a very long explanation when it comes to twills.
Well, let's go. People want to know about how you design. Paula had a question, and so did Sandra about do you design things ahead of time, and do you use a computer or do you draw it out?
For the woven dresses, I will sketch something out, a
Uh-huh.
design to give, the families an idea of what to
Oh,
expect.
okay.
Um, Some of the dresses I've used designs from their grandmother's rugs. So they'll send me a photo of
Oh,
their grandmother's rug and they'll want this
oh.
specific design. It's a probably majority of the time it's just like a border design and I'll try to include that into it or I might change it up to to make it look what I want or to put my spin on it. And yeah, that's what I'll do with the woven dresses. With the sash belts, a lot of it is kind of just, on the go, on the fly designs. And, if I don't like it, I'll take it back out and redo it. When it comes to the other stuff, the art part of it, I like to let it flow to me. I try not to, it's harder to plan it out on paper than it is to, try to weave it. And most of the times when I try to do that, what I drew out, what I sketched beforehand doesn't translate to the loom. I might go a different direction. And majority of the times I do go with that different direction. So yeah. And I don't use a computer. I've tried, I bought an iPad specifically for that, but it just did not pan out the way I thought it was gonna be. So now I just use it just for, business stuff.
Well, speaking of the dresses, a lot of people want to know what are they made of? April was asking this. Joy was asking this. Are they wool? Are they cotton, linen, warp and weft?
Um, they are all wool. So wool warp and wool weft.
Oh, really?
Yeah, wool warped and wool weft. My whole how do I say this? My approach to weaving dresses is it has to have a nice drape and it has to have a nice flow to it. I don't There's some, this is no shade to other weavers, but some weavers will make the dresses really dense, really heavy, and it'll be really stiff. And I
Mm.
don't like those. I don't think that's a good look. So I try to weave them to where they have a nice drape, they flow, they conform to the body. And oversized pieces in general, when you make a piece oversized, especially when it comes to a dress, it's just fits a lot better. They're able to do a lot more stuff with it in the dress if they need to. That's the other thing, if they need to. So yeah.
You mentioned taking the flock up into the mountains. Now people are asking about your flock. They want to know how many sheep do you have? What kind do you have? And just kind of introduce us all to your sheep. I wish I'd shown some a picture. You have some of the
Yeah.
cutest pictures of sheep. So when you go to
I,
his Instagram, you will see these just adorable sheep. So talk some about your flock, if you would.
So I started my flock back in 2020 during the pandemic,
Oh, there you
and
go.
no one's going anywhere, and no one's doing anything. So it was probably the most perfect time to start my flock. And so right now I currently have I want to say 32 sheep. I had 17 lambs this past
Wow.
um, lambing season. So they just went to Tees at the beginning of May, Tisnasbus, and for them to, because we combine flocks. There's three families that combine their flocks together to make one big flock, and they have to spend at least 1 month together to get, accustomed to one another, to being around one another, and then we take them up the mountain. It's about 12 miles to the cabin, to the where the corral is up there. It's about a 4,000 foot difference in elevation. So we're going from about 4,000 feet all the way up to 9,000, just short of 9,000. So yeah, and they'll spend the summer up there, grazing where it's a lot cooler and there's more grass, and bring them back down here at the beginning of October. So I'll be up there, and for the rest of the summer.
Oh, really? You stay up there?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna stay up
Weave
there
while
this
you're up there?
summer, and yeah, I will. I'm gonna take, I'm gonna be taking uh a one loom and all of my spindles, like the photo that's right there. I'm taking all of my drop spindles. I might take my wheel with me. Um, so yeah, just try to do as much work as I can when we're not busy with the sheep.
Now, are all your sheep churro sheep? Mary was asking about that.
Shoot. Yes, they are all Navajo-Churro sheep. So yeah.
Kevin, we have a problem. We need another hour. We need to talk more. I want to ask more about, your dyeing and the weaving and the spinning. You're a Renaissance man. You do it all. I don't know how you have time, but thank you so much for being on here today. It was wonderful. Everyone loves your work. People are just singing your praises over here in chat. So thank you, Kevin, so much for taking time and being with us today. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone that joined today and listened to me talk about my work and what I'm doing. So I'm just, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go look at his website. I mean, his Instagram. There's some gorgeous, gorgeous images on there and more about his work. And I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. Like I said, we could have done another hour easy today, right? Kevin's an extraordinary artist and just a gentle soul. He's one of those people that you want to go hang out with, right? So thank you so much, Kevin, for being here today. We really do appreciate it. We want to thank our sponsor, Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. If y'all are watching, I hope you enjoyed this as much as everybody else did. What a wonderful episode. And it's people like the Quilt and Textile Museum that make it happen. Thank you for your sponsorship so that we get to talk to Kevin and spend an afternoon talking about, spinning, weaving, and sheep and all kinds of wonderful things. If you want to sponsor an episode, and we've got some empties coming up, we've got several episodes open and available. Go to the website and you can choose any date that's available, and you can just purchase it right online. If you have a question, you can call the office. We'll be glad to help you with that. You can do it as an individual, your guild. If somebody coming up is a member of your guild and you want to support them, that would be wonderful. So thank you so much, Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. We will also thank everybody because we are so excited about this. I'm all a flux. Convergence is going to happen, y'all, and we have a signed contract. Yes, finally, New Orleans 2026. We are so excited about being there. It is June the 12th through the 16th. Everything is in one
August,
building.
Kathy.
August. June, August the 12th through the 16th. See, I'm so excited. August the 12th through the 16th. And I some of you are going, oh my gosh, it's going to be hot. It's in one building. with air conditioning. You'll be doing great. You'll just go straight to your classes, back to your room. And then I know you're going to go out though. It's New Orleans, and who doesn't want to hit New Orleans? So thank you so much. We're going to have all kinds of registration and classes, and all that information will be coming down the pike, but we have a signed contract. We are good to go. Look forward to more information. Again, August the 12th through the 16th, New Orleans Convergence will be there. We are so excited. We want to thank everybody who's made donations and did memberships with us. Those are the things that keep Textiles and Tea going, as well as all of our other programming. And we really do appreciate you all being a member. You want to join, because if you're a member, you know, that's how you can take classes. If you make a donation, you get some perks for doing that at Convergence too. So keep that in mind. If you missed an episode, if you want to watch this one again, please do so. You can do it through the HGA Facebook page, or you can do it on YouTube. And if you do YouTube, go ahead and sign up, because if you do, then you'll get a notice saying that another episode's been uploaded. Next week, we have another tapestry person, the famous Jean-Pierre Larochette. Sorry, Jean-Pierre. I know you're watching and I just destroyed your name. I'm so sorry. We are so excited to have him. If you are not familiar with his work, check it out. He's going to be wonderful. He's a sweetheart to interview. So I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Happy tea.